time out of your day to, reach out and want to do an interview. And, with Forever Metal, you guys have something that's cool and new and fresh and is needed out there, in the power metal, industry. I don't think there's too many power metal bands that have kind of come out with something a little bit fresh. So, Reverence is something that is, I think, has a very good staying power, and it's almost somewhat of a super group, is what I would call it.
People have labeled us that, but I don't know. It's hard when you're within the circle. It's hard to really to know whether that's true or not. I don't like to pat myself really hard on the back. I know we've got some good songs, and to me they're just songs. I'm a fairly normal person. Just happens to play guitar, and people like the music, which I'm very fortunate for. So, and we plan on doing more.
Well, I think that's, a good way of looking at it. But, Doc came from, Savatage, Crimson Glory. You've come from Tokyo Blade. Everybody else has come from, other bands here and there. So when you kind of look at it, it is somewhat, I wouldn't call it a super group, but it is, a good element where you're seasoned veterans, you know what you were looking for as far as the music you wanted to portray. So for some people that might not know how the group came about, just tell us how it formed and did it spark a conversation? We've read things here and there, but from the inside, and how did the band come about?
Yeah, so are we going right now?
We're going right now.
Okay, man. The band came about really because I'd been with Blade and, done the album and DVD and tours and stuff all over Europe and so on, and we were having a lot of internal problems with the band, and specifically with one particular person, and it was just creating havoc, and it was almost like a Spinal Tap kind of thing. So I on the last tour, I knew it was not going to last. So I came off the tour, and it was the last show was on Halloween of '09. So I came home and just kind of chilled out for the holidays and decided, I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do, and there was a few other offers about joining some other band and stuff like that, but I didn't really feel like getting back in that kind of thing. I wanted to kind of create my own thing again, but it was a lot of work, of course. So kind of took the time off until New Year's Eve, and I started looking for a singer, which is a key element. I have to have somebody I can write with, and then somebody who I think is, not just your average Joe singer, bar band singer, for say. But, I found Todd on MySpace and loved his voice immediately. He had a demo on there, a couple of demos on there that I just really thought they were great. And I didn't even know he was in Jack's band at that point, in Burning Starr. And my management got a hold of him a few days later, and I talked to him soon after, and we decided to meet up and kind of got a game plan going if we wanted to do it. And if we did, what kind of direction and all this stuff. So we got a game plan together and started writing. And, after a couple of slow starts on a couple of songs, we kind of finally found our direction. And man, we were off. We were writing really well. And by the time we got a few demos under our belt, and I went to Doc. I've been friends with Doc for probably 17 years. And went to Doc and played the demos for Doc, and he joined on immediately. And then I went and approached my bass player from Tokyo Blade, who I didn't have any problem with him from the band. And he heard the demos he was on, so we were all set with that. And then Doc, a couple months later, decided, because the music really called for two guitar players, so Doc suggested a friend of his, Pete Rossi from Pittsburgh, who's really kind of an unknown guy. Man, he's a real shredder. And for being the second guitarist, and we tried him out, and he was perfect. He and I have the same influences, and we worship Chris Oliva and Randy Rhoads and that old school kind of metal. So that's really a Reader's Digest of how the band came together.
Yeah, I've been reading up on it here and there, and you can, Savatage, you mentioned Chris, and I did have a chance to see him live. They were a great band, and now Trans-Siberian Orchestra kind of carries that element, with everybody having, from ex-members of Savatage, being in there and putting that out there. So it's a very, very good fit. And listening to the songs, you can see, and hear that element, as far as that goes. And that's what I think a lot of the newer bands that are coming out kind of don't capture, that type of element, where their roots are. So it's good to hear that you guys put it all together, and it's come out in this album. So I've taken, a couple listens to it, and it's tight.
We tried hard to try to have a vision, and what I was shooting for was like an early Judas Priest, early Queensryche, early Savatage kind of a vibe, real metal, power metal kind of record. But I always loved Chris's playing, and so did Pete. So we really tried to, put a lot of elements that we loved in Chris's style, and because it was a really unique player, and we'll never replace Chris. Chris is phenomenal, and he's godlike to us as far as guitarists go. But we tried to at least have some of those elements in phrasings and note choices, and kind of even somewhat riffs that were more Chris-ish. For instance, Vengeance is Mine and Revolution Rising have, to me, a little bit of a Chris element to it. And early Savatage. So, we tried to kind of keep his vibe, or what it felt like to us, alive in the band, and but still make it our own thing too,
Yeah, there's a lot of, you can hear that too. And when you guys, sat down to record the album, did Doc say, oh my God, that sounds like Chris, or is there any, element to it where he kind of said, hey, this kind of takes me back to the old days?
He never really said that. I not that I wouldn't have wanted him to, but I know that Chris is irreplaceable, and if you were in the band with a guy and go, yeah, that's a lot like Chris, it almost kind of diminishes Chris. So nobody can replace Chris and what he created and his technique and how great of a guitar player he was. But I think there's definite elements, and Doc has suggested, even in the slower song we got, After the Leaves Are Fallen, the heavier part is very Savatage-ish in just the rhythms that are created. And of course, that helps that we've got Doc in the band, because he was part of that sound too. So without a doubt, there's some Savatage influence, and some of it was purposeful, and of course some of it we can't help just because of Doc being in the band. But then I tried really hard to make it not just, I didn't want a Savatage kind of clone, even though we loved that kind of music and loved Chris's playing. I really loved early Judas Priest and early Queensryche, and of course that kind of style really fits well with Todd's voice. So those were the really kind of the main elements that we were shooting for. And then on top of it, make it our own thing, And that's part of what the name Reverence means. And Reverence, we're revering that kind of early 80s metal that we grew up on and loved. So that's the name of the band even kind of reflects into our vision.
And it seems to be that with, we had a couple of, I think, a bad decade or so of just music in general, and for some good reason, a lot of that style is coming back. I guess, it's better late than never, but a lot of bands, even the 80s bands, are all starting to come back, and there's a lot of elements of that 80s style of music that's coming out. I think people finally got sick and tired of just, crappy music coming out over the last several years. But there are a handful of bands that have come out that have really put the pedal to the metal. But the 80s and even late 70s, early 70s, you had 2 decades of really powerful music, and it's kind of, I don't know what happened, but I think people just forgot how to play or write good songs. So it's good to see that.
I think the public got really burned out. Unfortunately, in America, unlike Europe, Europeans, they tend to latch onto something and really stick with it. Americans are very fickle, so they're always on to the next thing. And honestly, it's probably surprising that the 80s lasted as long as they did, because stuff usually burns out pretty quick. And then, of course, we moved into grunge, and then grunge moved into, kind of new metal, and new metal turned into crossover pop, country, rock kind of crap that we've got now with Nickelback and all that garbage. And, that's kind of where we're at. And, of course, everything runs in circles. So, where would they go from now, from here, from the current state of music? And then, of course, some of the younger kids are finding, hey, the 80s were actually pretty cool. And these guys, hey, they play guitar solos, whereas, a lot of bands, Disturbed and stuff, they don't. Well, I suppose a little bit on Disturbed stuff, they play some guitar solos. But a lot of these bands, they couldn't play a guitar solo to save their life. And, you know, I don't know if they just choose not to or if they just can't or what, but, you know, that was a big part of the heyday of 80s metal and rock was guitar solos. So, you know, it's not like we're trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to be the savior of metal or anything like that. We just, you know, wanted to come up with our own thing that, you know, fit with the things that we thought were missing and stuff we grew up loving, because it seemed like not a lot of other bands were doing that. But you're right. There's a lot of other bands that are up and starting, younger bands that are trying to, you know, hoist and carry the flag for the early 80s metal too. I think we vary somewhat from them. I'm not sure how, but some of that stuff has a little bit of a cheese factor, which I think they do on purpose, you know. But
yeah,
we purposely don't really try to fall into that cheese factor. And I hate to call us more genuine than them. I hate to put somebody down like that. It's not for me to judge, but you know, some of them they're dressing in the, you know, the leopard skin print pants and stuff like that now, you know, and the head bandanas and all that stuff. I mean, I never wore that stuff to begin with, but some bands back in the 80s obviously did that. Obviously, we grew up loving. I mean, we loved all the leather stuff that Judas Priest wore, and you know, so we can't condemn it forever. But you know, I think that we're a little different than some of these other bands in that respect.
No, you can see it, you know, from what I've seen in the videos, you know, here and there, you can see that there is that genuine factor as far as the playing in you know, with this style of music. And I think it's because you're all seasoned veterans. You know what your goal was, and there is that camaraderie between you guys as far as, you know, playing and obviously the songwriting. So, you know, the newer people that are trying to put out the style of music did not grow up in that era, and they're trying to emulate it where you've been there and you've done that and you knew what you were trying to do, and you put out a successful album as far as the songs go. And I've listened to all of them, and I can't find a hole in any of it, you know, which is
thanks.
Anyway, you can't. I mean, I'm very blatantly honest when it comes to music. I like so many genres, you know, in the metal sense, and there are some bands that'll have one or two good songs on an album, and that's it. And, you know, should have spent, you know, $2 in iTunes and downloaded where there's, you know, strength from top to bottom, you know, as far as progression. Even the recording sounds great. Everything is crisp. You can hear everything, the vocal range, the kick drums, the lead, the rhythm, the bass, everything is, you know, on all cylinders, which is great.
Well, I appreciate that. You're very kind in saying that. We worked really, really hard on it. I mean, we spent a lot of money on it, and you know, we didn't want to come out and just kind of put something together and just throw it out there. If we were going to spend the time and spend the money and all the energy and effort, you know, we wanted it to be the very best we could, all the way down to the artwork and, of course, production. I mean, production, it doesn't matter how good a song you have. If the production sucks, it doesn't matter. So we wanted to make sure everything was the very best we possibly could, and I think we accomplished that for the most part. But the difficult part, and I'm sure other bands find the same problem, is that, you know, we've listened to these songs hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. I've re-recorded these songs over and over. We recorded the guitars on the final album 4 times. So, I mean, it gets difficult to be objective to whether or not the material is as good as we think it is. You know what I mean? Because you're so close to it that it's difficult to go, wow, you know, that's a really great riff, and then, you know, 6 months later go, maybe that riff isn't so great anymore, you know? And so it's really difficult to decide and to tell what to keep, what not to keep, what's good, what isn't good, once you've been around it so much. You know, it only takes the unbiased people to listen to you, to the material, to be able to kind of give that back, feedback back. And unfortunately, we don't have a ton of that because everyone's biased around us. You know, when you got friends and family, and they're like, oh, that's great, you know, but they're biased, you know. So you can't win.
That is very true, you know, as far as that goes. But, you know, from the social circles, you know, you have a very good following, and people, you know, have always said, hey, this is good. You have to go out and buy it, check it out, take a listen. Don't steal it, purchase it. And, you know, they share your stuff. And I think, you know, a lot of people do knock, you know, the internet industry as far as it goes, but it can take things very, very far. You know, if I didn't, you know, put something out there and something came back, I would have never even heard of it. You know, so I'm very thankful, you know, thankful to the social circle, you know, as far as that goes. So there are some, naysayers, but, it's very minuscule. And what this album has to offer, and it's power. And that is very, very important. There's not, like I said, from start to finish, it's completely powerful. And it resonates. And we're, obviously, the album's still fresh, but hopefully in the years to come, this will continue the trend. And you'll be a force, to be reckoned with, over, several years.
I guess time would only tell really how well it ages down the road. But yeah, hopefully it stands the test of time and people enjoy it. One of the things I really like most about it is some of the feedback we've been getting, which has been tremendous. And you just don't know what to expect. Like I said, when you're so close to music, you don't know how good or bad it is sometimes. I mean, whether or not you've got some good songs to a point. But we've had an overwhelmingly great reaction, hugely positive reviews. I mean, it's been a very welcome, warm surprise to us. So we're very thankful for everybody that's been so supportive of the band. And, of course, the social media, like you said, has been very important. We work the social media really hard, whereas some bands don't. And that it can make or break you because you can get out and reach a lot of people, and nowadays that's hard to do. But like you said, it gets a bad rap sometimes, and maybe warranted in many cases because people are out stealing the music, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. So in a lot of respects, the music ends up becoming a promotional tool, versus a sales thing. But if it gets people to the shows or gets people to buy your merchandise, then it brings them back around, especially if they really love the material. So it's really important still, even though they're going to steal it, the material will be really good because they'll keep coming back. So I agree with you on that aspect.
Yeah, that is, very true. Is, even if they might take a sample of it here and there, when you do tour, then they'll come to the show, purchase the merchandise, and help support the band, in other ways, and then, spread the word. As well, which is extremely important. Now, you mentioned something about Europe, and I've had conversations with people, and I'm like, from what I hear, metal is big over there. They love it. A very important person in the music industry said, oh, that's a bunch of hogwash. That's not true. And I've noticed that a lot of bands that are power metal do tour a lot in Europe, but do not tour in the States. So since you've been over there and you're over here, can you kind of share why most power metal bands will tour over there but not do much touring in the States?
Well, I think I covered a hint of it at the beginning of our conversation. America is very fickle, so they're always moving on to the next thing, and they just don't grasp onto something and love it. So metal has gone underground here in the States. There's still pockets of people that really love it and large groups, community, but they're all underground, whereas Europe, they've embraced it and they've held on to it and passed it on from generation to generation. I mean, we've played over there and where we'd have kids that are probably 6, 8 years old, raising their fist, singing along to the songs. The only way they're doing that is from their parents. So the parents have passed it on to their kids, whereas, for whatever reason, in America, that doesn't happen. So even though, it's died to some degree since the 80s in Europe, it's still far, far stronger than here in the States. I mean, when you see bands like Warrant and Lynch Mob and Dokken and all these bands that were big in the States that can't hardly pull 1,000 people, it tells you a lot. Whereas some of those bands could go to Europe and play in front of festival crowds. The only time they're playing big shows over here is if they got, Rocklahoma or some big festivals in the States. And those festivals there's a lot of those in Europe. So the opportunities to play in front of bigger crowds is a lot more readily available over there. And
yeah, it's funny you say that as far as passing the torch down, from the parents. My son is the same way. He's been listening to a lot of the 80s style music and power metal. He's 10 now, and he started about 6 to 8 years old. And same thing with my daughter. She's 12 now, so we try to pass the torch down as much as we can, and hopefully the kids, grab onto it and they're able, to carry the torch, as well with good music. That's my opinion, as far as that goes. So power to the parents, I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately what that means is that the market is different. So, there's virtually no market here in the States. So the market is in Europe and in Asia and in Scandinavia, and it's even stronger in the UK than it is the States. So unfortunately, we have to take our product, to where the market is, and the market is over there. So, and of course, when you've got downloads and things like that, it even diminishes even whatever sales you may have, even out of Europe. So you have to go over there and play and tour just to that's where you're going to make your money, is off the gig money and merchandise and so on. So that's my only explanation. But it makes sense to me.
Well, it's a good explanation because you're actually in it and you've been through it. So, I had not a long conversation, but I went on the Monsters of Rock cruise last year, and it had the bands, the old 80s bands, and there's the new one this year, too, which I'll be going on. But, I had a conversation with somebody just, that's in the industry. We all know who, the person is. And they're like, oh, no, that's not the case. I'm like, okay, well, I kind of thought it was, and kind of shedded some light into it because I love a lot of the bands, like, with the style that you play. And they have one festival. It's a power metal festival. I'm sure you know where it is, and it's in Atlanta. It's in September, and it's a one-off show. Like Pretty Maids are going to be there. It's their only show, in the States. And it's like, oh, man, it's like you got to travel if you want to see bands like that. So even with your band, it's kind of like, my next question was any dates that you think about touring in the United States. So I think you kind of hit a little light on the subject, but I'll ask it anyway.
The tour that we've got for Europe is for November, the later part of November, the last couple of weeks of November. So if we do any shows in the States, it would probably be more like warm-up shows for the tour, and it would probably be up here in Michigan or maybe in Chicago. Otherwise, that's probably the only dates that we'll end up doing in the States. And we've been having a lot of people ask, but there's just not enough of it. And we talked to some people, even some smaller festivals, Chicago and down near Atlanta. It's not the same place you're talking about, but it's a different festival that they just, they're lucky if they pull, a couple hundred people. So it's just not feasible for us because, Todd and I are in Michigan. Pete, the other guitarist, is in Pittsburgh. Doc is in North Carolina. Ned, the bass player, he's in Florida. So we're kind of spread all out, and it costs us $1,000 just to get anywhere. So I got to make at least $1,000 just to break even, And when they're only offering, half that in the States, that tells you a lot right there. But to carry on your statement there about the Atlanta show, and you know who I'm talking about. We've been in early discussions. Our album came out too late for the booking for this year, but it's at least a possibility for the next year or two to be able to get on that bill for Reverence. But everything else we have is all in November so far.
Well, at least you get to get out there, and play and showcase your talent. That's very, very important. As you know, as a musician, that it's good to have an album, but a lot of people want to see it live, and it's good that.
Well, and we want to present it live too.
Yeah, that's the fun part about it. And it's, when I hear something, on a CD or album or vinyl or download, I actually don't download anything. I have to have the physical product in my hand. And then I go see it live. It's just so much different, as far as it goes. And you can see the passion, you can see the element, you can improvise a little bit more.
Real
have
musicians
that interaction.
Real musicians want to go play. They don't want to just sit in the studio and make albums and then make albums and then make albums. Real musicians really want to go out and play, and that's the reason why the majority of musicians do what we do, because we enjoy playing and entertaining and getting in front of the people. So, you have to go do that. So it's almost a must. And in order to try to keep the people into the band, you have to do that. So it'd be really, really tough for us to do 3 albums and not play a show. Keep people interested. Oh yeah, those are really great albums, but you guys don't ever play out. It's really hard to keep the people, hooked into what you're trying to do.
Well, that's a good segue. So this is a 2-part question, almost the same but a little different. When you do play live, what's your favorite track to play live off the album?
Well, we haven't played live with Reverence yet because we only just came out with the album. No, we haven't played live. We've done videos, we've done rehearsals, but we haven't actually in front of the public yet because the album just came out, 6 weeks ago or whatever. So this Euro tour will be the first one. But as far as what I'm looking forward to playing, I think the songs that I'm looking forward to is probably the title track, and When Darkness Calls, and then Gatekeeper, and Too Late. There's a few of them I just as soon drop from the set list, but they seem to be favorites of the other guys. So, but we're also going to be playing a bunch of Savatage songs. We'll be playing some Tokyo Blade songs and Burning Starr songs. So, I mean, we're going to be throwing kind of a hits package at people, as well as our new album.
Well, that's awesome. It kind of really stinks that I probably won't ever get to see it live unless I make that trip to Atlanta if you guys finally get there as far as that goes. So hopefully somebody out there will have a YouTube of it and be able to post it live, and of course I'll share it as well. With that being said, and you mentioned, Tokyo Blade and Burning Starr and, Savatage, with your experience, how was it different with Tokyo Blade going into the studio as it is with Reverence now?
Well, you're dealing with different people, different egos, different everything. I mean, I think, early in the lineup that I was a part of in Tokyo Blade, everything was going quite well when we first got all together, and it didn't start rearing its ugly head. The problems didn't until, after we did a couple of tours, and one particular member just ended up basically being egotistical and narcissistic, and it ruined the dynamics within the band, and it ruined camaraderie, it ruins morale, it ruins a lot of things within the band. So comparing that with what we're doing with Reverence is night and day, because you would think that there would be even bigger problems with the band, since you've got, Doc from Savatage and Todd from Burning Starr and Ned from Burning Starr and me from Blade, that you'd think, oh man, you've got even more egos and even more problems, but that's the opposite. All of us are really, we've done this a number of times, and we know what we're doing. This isn't our first rodeo, and it's just, everybody's a pro. They know what they're doing. They come in and get a job done, and there's no bitching and moaning and crying and whining and me first and all this crap. So it's night and day. It really is.
So that's good to hear, and it definitely comes across as far as, the album goes. Like I said, I can't really, say too many good things about it because, it's already being said, and it resonates, as far as the professionalism, from what I can see, what's put out there and from what I can hear, as far as that goes, and being veterans. I think that's kind of what separates, your band Reverence aside from, pretty much all the newcomers that are coming out, and that's the veteranship, and you've been there and done that, and you wanted to put out a quality product. So, that's, you hit as they say, the hammer on the nail.
Well, I think experience is the best teacher, so I mean, having been through the ringer before, and having done all this stuff, you get a good grasp of where you want to go, what not to do, what to do, and things like that. So I think obviously the experience of doing all this and everybody involved having done it really, really helps a lot. And I really appreciate all the kind words. We've had nothing but gracious reviews, and it still warms my heart. So to have somebody that really digs what we're doing and worked really, really hard on it, because the album actually took about 2.5 years in the making to put together. So it didn't just happen overnight. So it's been a real labor of love, and to have everybody's feedback like that has been great.
Well, we're going to put out a review, shortly, probably in the next week or so, as far as that goes, track by track, and we'll be, sharing it through our channel as well.
Great.
And,
great.
As far as, and we've got a couple more minutes, as far as the songwriting goes, can you explain a little bit about the writing process? And everybody has their own flair, as far as where they come from and how it all came together.
Well, there's a couple of guys in the band that don't tend to be as much writer. I mean, Doc was never a really big writer in Savatage, so he has his own style, which I was exactly what brought me and not only being friends with him, but I knew I wanted Doc in the band because he has a certain aspect and style that I grew up loving and with Savatage. But Todd and I are the main writers, and I think on the next album, which I've already started putting together some songs and riffs for, I think Ned, the bass player, and Pete will probably be a little more integral than the first album. I don't think we're going to vary too far from that one, but it was basically Todd and I writing 99% of the material, and then Pete would come in and he would do a lot of his layering and texturing and things like that, adding a lot of stuff to the songs, which adds a lot of interesting aspects. But as far as the songwriting, when I came to it, I would actually lay out an entire song almost start to finish. We may change some things and arrangements and so on, but then I would hand that empty demo to Todd. It would have all the drums and the bass and everything on it. And I have a really good grasp of the way Doc plays, so I would set up my drums, my finger drums and drum machine versus how I would like the layout for Doc to play. And then he would add in his own flair and fills and stuff when we do the studio recording. But to give that to Todd, then, Todd takes it and runs with it, and he puts in all his vocal melodies and layerings and things like that. So that, for the most part, that's how that works. And the aspect that I tried to take with musically is that, we went to a Lynch Mob show last night, and George said it perfectly. They just put out an EP, a 4-song EP, and he said, and they played a couple songs out of it, and he was really excited, that people were really responding well to it. And that's the same feeling that we have, and that is he was really appreciative and thanked the crowd that, he is 57 years old, yet made him feel like he was 16, and he was so excited about the new material. So that's the kind of approach I wanted to take on it. I wanted to try to capture the stuff I loved when I was younger, and it made me feel excited about music. Oh man, this is great. These are some great riffs and things like that. And that's really the direction I took with it.
Oh no, it definitely came across. And speaking of George, he's definitely I think Lynch Mob is back on all cylinders. I've seen him a couple times and got to see him on the ship once as a rock cruise, and before he came out, and only I guess he had a falling out, and he had I think Chad West singing for him, and it's glad that Lynch Mob is back all together, and you can see the passion, and it's good when the fans do react in a positive influence and want to push it. Old men do, and it's good as you start to get up there as far as your veteranship. I won't say age, but as far as when you start to climb that ladder and that plateau, you still want to put out good music, and you've expanded your horizons. You got a lot of ideas that are out there, and to put it all together and have fans react in a positive fashion. It's really done in all elements, as far as that goes.
Well, you almost have to look back to what you got into it for. And if you got into it for the excitement and I just love music, then you have to either try to recapture that if you lose it or try to sustain it, which is very difficult. But apparently, in what was going on with Lynch Mob last night, and they were great. They were really put on a great show, and Oni sounded great, and they performed really well. It was kind of wild because, backstage they were like, man, you kind of screwed up there, and you screwed up there, but they were really cool about it to each other. But they still cared, They weren't like, yeah, I screwed up, no big deal. They were like, man, we got to improve in that spot. Oh man, next time we got to make sure we hit that. Because they really cared, and even though they're an older band and veterans too, they still had a passion for it, and they still cared, and you have to have that. Otherwise you lose the excitement of why you even got into it.
That is, some very, very good information as far as that goes. And it goes into, segueing to the next question, what is your advice for inspiring musicians for now and for in the future as far as what you can see with the industry inside and out? What would you give just heartfelt advice?
I would tell somebody that don't worry about getting a record label. There's easy enough ways to get your music out to the masses with the social media, and there's a lot of ways to even get it on iTunes and Amazon and so on. You don't need to worry about getting to a label because the label's just going to take all your hard work and give you 10%. and then send you the bill when it's all done. And they're going to sit there and collect a lot of profit, and most of them are crooked, and they'll take all your hard work and then tell you they sold 1,000 copies and you still owe them money when they just sold 10,000 copies. So I don't think anybody really needs labels anymore. And as far as musically, you just got to do what your heart is. You got to be who you are. If you want to do new metal, then do new metal. You got to take your direction. And if you want to do old school metal, do old school metal. You have to be who you are. Let your influences shine, but make it yourself, make it your own. And you have to surround yourself with really good people, not just musicians, but good people. People that aren't in it for the glory, that aren't in it for the girls, or not in it for the drugs. You have to remember why you got into it. I got into it because I love music. If you get in it for the girls and the drugs, you're in it for the wrong reason, But you got to surround yourself with good people you can trust and count on. And it's like a gang. It's like a group and camaraderie, especially if you want to take this very far. You got to be able to trust these people, and they got to be able to trust you. So it's a difficult thing to do all that, to find those special pieces to the puzzle. And I've been very fortunate to have found what I think are the guys that we need in Reverence in that very thing. So obviously didn't have it with Tokyo Blade, and I thought I had it then, but at this point I feel like I really have it. Have a strong lineup with Reverence.
Well, that's some really, really good advice, and it's once this goes viral, people will hear that, and it's good to hear it from somebody that's been in the industry for a while and has already went through one band, has another band, and is ready to basically go forward with the music and press as hard as you can, to get it out there and put out a good product. So that's really, really good advice. Now we're going to go into a little bit of your personal side as far as your guitar rig. Can you break it down as far as what you may use in the studio compared to what you might bring on tour with you playing live, and your favorite types of guitars, your favorite heads, your favorite pedals and things that you would put together?
Yeah, when I do recording, I have a home studio, and Todd does too. So even though we recorded everything in a normal studio, we actually went back through. I wasn't very happy with the guitars from the studio, so we decided to retrack them, and we retracked them several times with different tones and so on in my home studio. Then Todd did all his vocals in his home studio. So what I used versus studio in my own studio versus tour is this. I use Cakewalk Sonar, I think it's 9, Producer 9, which has a little bit of a learning curve. So does Pro Tools, but I think it's a little easier to learn. But I also use Pod Farm, and Pod Farm is basically it's a Line 6 product that is for digital recording, and it's difficult to get a really good warm tube sound out of digital products. But I think we you got to do a lot of tweaking, like any kind of pedal. So I think we came upon a good feel for the guitars that we have because it was recorded with that. And that's about the limitation of what I do. I don't use a lot of effects on there. I try to make it a nice, fat, warm, crunchy, but yet I can still squeal kind of a tone, and which you can hear on the album. Now, what I take on tour is still a Line 6 board. It's the X3 Live, and it's somewhat modified because for whatever reason, Line 6 did not want to make the Pod Farm compatible as far as the settings to take it from the Pod Farm to the X3 Live. So you have to it, and I had to modify it. And there's a double setting in there where you can run 2 rigs at the same time, which is what I do. And basically what I'm using with the Pod Farm is fairly basic stuff. And I could actually post some settings about it. But as far as go, I really like Mesa Boogie, dual rectifier with a Marshall 412 1968 cabinet, Celestion. That's a really common cabinet. I mean, there's nothing fancy about it. Unfortunately, a lot of the tones that not only myself but George Lynch and everybody comes out of your hands. You can sit there and play the same rig George has got or I've got, and you won't get the same sound. It comes from the bones in your hand and resonations and just techniques and things like that. So that's those are the things you can't copy. But as far as distortions, I use MLX, Distortion Plus, and analog, slight analog delay with a chorus. It's really basic stuff, really, and I try to let the amp do the majority of the work. But it's really basic stuff.
Well, that's awesome. You know, coming from a guitar player myself, you know, so it's really good to hear that, you know, when you can actually get the tone from your hand, you don't need an abundance of effects, you know, to make you sound good as far as that goes. And, you know, Lynch, you know, I took some of his guitar lessons, you know, a couple of years ago online when he had the Guitar Dojo, and you can see it, and he's always moving his hands and getting that sound and that sharpness down, pitch harmonics and dive bombs, you know, things like that. And you look at the rigs and you look at it, and it's like it's kind of, you know, there's a few pedals here and there, but as he's gotten, you know, more seasoned in his playing, he's stripped it down a lot too. So I think you know, said it perfectly. It comes from your hands, you know, as far as that goes. People pile up equipment.
Yeah, that's true. Last night when I saw him, he didn't have a lot of equipment, and I know for a fact, and you know, I've looked at some stuff that he's done for YouTube videos for educational years and years ago. I mean, he even has a certain way that he holds the pick that's, you know, very integral to his sound. And I suppose every guitar player is that way. You know, everybody holds it differently, and they palm mute differently, and so on. You know, and he was jumping from Fender guitars to ESP guitars to seems like what else was he using? He was using a Telly. I mean, you don't usually see a soap bar Telly, you know, given the sounds that you'd expect from George, but that's what he was using. And an old Fender Strat he was using, an old beat-up Fender Strat, but it sounded fantastic. You know, the guitars I use Jackson guitars mainly. I have an ESP that I did 50/50 with on the album. It's a limited edition ESP, but I mainly Pete and I both stick to Charvel Jacksons. They're pretty known for being the metal guitar, you know. Yeah,
I saw him in the videos, and you know, Charvel was like, wow, that's you know, a name I haven't heard in a while. I mean, Jackson is relevant, you know, all over the place, but Charvel I think is making a comeback. I had a Charvel when I was younger too, and it's like it's good to see them kind of come back a little. Everybody that played, you know, in the '80s at least one time had a Charvel. Now, as far as that goes, and it is, you know, resonance of, you know, a metal guitar. Same thing with Jackson.
Yeah, now that I know that they've changed the Charvels from being like the San Dimas years ago to the originals, and I think he's got a Model 6 is what he used, which is an original from like 1984 or 85, versus some of the newer Charvels who are more, I think, Chinese or Japanese or some, you know, Asian made. They're not American made anymore. Whereas the guitar he was made in the San Dimas obviously were in California, so those were American made. They're a little better guitars. So there's actually a big difference in even, and Jackson does the same thing now. You know, they're not even American made anymore. They ship them overseas. So it's a little tougher, obviously more expensive to get the older ones that are a little better quality. But I mean, I like even the current Jacksons myself. I use the Zakk Wylde EMGs, which just roar, you know, and I've had a couple of Jacksons with hot rails in them, and these are EMG actives. I like the actives versus the passive. They just have a lot more bite on it. And I got another, my ESP Limited has a Seymour Duncan, which has got a little different sound to it, which, you know, that's why I like to mix it, and we recorded the guitars differently and so many times on the album to kind of give a nice full feel. You've got a brighter and then a thicker guitar sound on doubling on both guitarists.
Yeah, it's really cool, you know, to get some insight as far as what goes into a recording process. So, you know, thanks, you know, for sharing some of the recording styles of you and, you know, Reverence and Pete. And so it's really good to hear as far as that goes. And I really want to, you know, thank you for taking the time out of your day to giving us the video with interview with Forever in Metal. And I crossed up my days, you know, as far as the time structure in the day goes. I'm going through everything. It's like, oh my God, it's supposed to be next Sunday. So, you know, thanks for, you know, calling on, you know, out of the blue and out of the wind, stopping what you were doing. So we really appreciate it here, you know, at Forever in Metal. And I love the album. So anybody listening out there that does not have Reverence, go out and get it. You will not be disappointed. It's one of the true power metal albums of this year, in my opinion. So thanks again, Brian.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. And I wish you guys could find a way to come down here. There's a lot of good metal, down in South Florida. So maybe, I'll have some connections down here, and if it's worth it for you guys to come down, then, come on down.
We'd actually like to do, if we actually end up doing the Prog Power gig over the next year or so, what we'd like to do is an East Coast run out of it versus just go down for one show. So that would be something that we'd try to put together with that. And obviously with that, being from the Tampa, St. Pete area, it would be smart to try to go and do a couple of Florida dates along the and then up the East Coast. So that would be the optimal thing to do. But unfortunately, we have to go conquer Europe first. But
yeah, no,
I appreciate
it's understandable. It's understandable.
But I thank you so much for having me on and for the interview and giving me, and indulging me the ability to, push Reverence in the new album. Anybody that digs early, Judas Priest, Queensryche, and Savatage, then hopefully they would really love this album. It's all metal, and we got to stand together and make this thing come back, and we're doing our part. So we just hope everybody digs it and supports us. And I look forward to anybody that wants to come and chat with me on Facebook. You can look us up at facebook.com at Reverence Metal, or go to reverencemetal.com if you want to buy the CD, or you can even buy a download there. And, of course, it's on iTunes, Amazon, and elsewhere, too.
We'll be more than happy to, as they say, united in metal we stand, and we'll promote it, we'll push it, we'll put it out there. And, again, it also takes, you can put out good music, but not be social with your fans, with, potential people that want to help promote your music and have an ego.
Absolutely.
And it falls, incredibly, as far as that goes. And you reached out and, jumped on board, and, I'm thankful for you taking time out of your day as well, and obviously putting out a great album. And we look forward to sharing it with the masses and getting it out there as well. So anytime you want to, set something else up, we'll stay in touch for sure, and we'll chat all over Facebook and sometimes leave the politics out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it's all good, man. I really appreciate you having me on the show, and we definitely will stay in touch. So thanks, man, and you guys, you have a great rest of the weekend and the week, okay?
You too, man. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.